guys, welcome to Road Notes, where I'm taking you along with me on the journey of writing a novel. Come on! So the first draft is done, and there was much rejoicing, and there is much rejoicing. It's always a cause for celebration to finish the first draft of a piece of writing, whatever it is. And I believe that should be celebrated in a way that doesn't diminish the size of the task in front of you, which is revision, 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 but doesn't undervalue the importance of the accomplishment. So the end is the beginning. It's a sort of Zen kind of understanding. But here are a few thoughts I've been realizing as I've been finishing up the first draft. Some thoughts on ending, and then beginning the revision. Some general thoughts on endings and beginnings. So, endings. And in this case, I mean ending the story. Reaching the natural resolution to that arc of the story that you have been working on for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. I've heard it said in a talk from Andrew Stanton, one of the members of the Pixar Brain Trust, that stories should feel inevitable but not predictable. That the ending should have an element of the unexpected that fits completely within the story that's been established, but is surprising and brings the story to a conclusion in a way that feels completely satisfying. Oh, is that all? So that's why endings are tricky. There's a couple of things about the ending that have become more clear even this time as I've been writing this first draft. Number one, I think it's wise to know the ending before I start writing. It gives you a target to shoot for. You can write to that ending, and having that specific target means that you can shape the specific details of the story in such a way that will aim you more directly at that ending target. And I don't think you run the risk of losing that sense of discovery as you write. There's still plenty of things to discover along the way. And knowing the ending means that you can write more capably to the task of a fiction writer or a storyteller, which is the artful concealing and revealing of information. From a plotting standpoint, good storytelling knows when to conceal and when to reveal key pieces of information. I think that if you have the ending figured out, it will allow you to more artfully conceal and reveal information. The other thing about endings that I think is significant is that you should be prepared to have to take a couple of cracks at it. As an example of this, I had to rewrite the climactic scene of my novel, The Misadventured Summer of Tumbleweed Thompson, at least 3 different times. There are 2 or 3 different versions. Now, when I say different versions, I mean completely different versions. I had in my mind a way that I thought the ending should go based on the nature of the characters, their journey, the tone I wanted to strike, sort of humorous but also still high stakes and suspenseful. And I wrote it, and I wrote the heck out of it. And I wasn't sure about it, and certainly after a couple of my beta readers and critique partners looked at it, they definitely had some reservations about it. It just wasn't working. And that was enough for me. I think I knew I could do better, take another crack at it, and get more closely to the goal that I mentioned earlier. So at that point, I had to go back and dream up a new way to hit a lot of those same things, but something that would be more believable and more workable. And even after that second pass had gotten closer to that mark, I knew there were some more things that needed to be rewritten and altered. Eventually, it became something that I think really works as an ending. And what about beginning again? First, again, celebrate, rejoice. If it's a creative project that has taken any amount of hours to work through and demanded any amount of your will and imagination, then give thanks. You did it. And take some time. Let the draft rest. Let your creativity and imagination rest. Only you know how much time that is going to need to be. You give it a bunch of time, whether that's weeks, maybe more, maybe less, depending on your deadline, and then you start ramping back up to revise. You do that strategically, I think. For me, that means making a checklist of all the things that need to be addressed, and then you work back through it methodically. There's lots of different ways to go about revising, very strategically, kind of off the cuff, a little bit of both, very organically, and you might discover new trails to follow within that revision that weren't even on your mind when you began the revision, and that is obviously totally acceptable as well. Obviously, deadline pending, of course. Regardless, the end is the beginning of something new. The process of doing the next phase should be respected just as much as the process of writing that first draft was. Each phase has its own challenges and its own rewards. And eventually, I trust that I will get to the point where this is ready to go out into the world and meet some people and play on their imaginations and hopefully inspire and bring joy and beauty and truth to them. Here's a quick postscript that I was thinking about, kind of a big picture thought as it comes to this idea of beginnings and endings and just the whole creative process as we kind of wrap up this little series. The act of creation is ultimately a perfectly hopeful act. We live in a world that is imperfect, under siege by 1,000 factors that all bring chaos to our attempts to make something orderly and beautiful. The curse is the curse of futility. No matter what we do, it feels like it's never enough under the curse. Have you felt that? But occasionally, through our creative work, we're blessed to be able to see that curse come untrue, to get glimpses of how it will be fully removed and unbroken and undone when all things are made right. Our Creator's plan was one of fruitfulness, for our work to achieve something, to amount to something. Often it is undone by so many factors, ourselves most of all, but the opportunity to make something is still there every time we sit down to do our creative work, and it's a small way to undo that curse of futility, to loosen those tight laces that are wrapped around our efficacy, to let it breathe a little bit, and to see it for what it really will be. So I sit down and I say, for a few minutes, I'm going to anticipate the undoing of all the futility. I'm going to push back the darkness and I'm going to bring light into it. Doing creative work is a way to lift up your hands and say, I'm going to attempt to make something. I believe this thing will be good and orderly, and that will make it beautiful. And I will anticipate the true final undoing of all the futility that the curse has brought. Thanks for hanging out with me on the road here. If you haven't already, sign up for my newsletter. Put a link here at the end of the video as well as down below. It's the best way to stay in touch, and send me a message sometime. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks a lot, and good luck with all your creative pursuits.